Since this is another episode that I ended up scrapping for review, since that I cancelled Valentine's Half Month 6, I guess my minimal goal is to review episodes that were scrapped for a scrapped schedule. To tell you the truth, it will probably make things a lot more easier for me to review material that I ended up skipping out on if I did my Valentine's Half Month 6 schedule. This episode from OKKO is a huge mixed bag when it comes to people finding the episode cringe, all the while finding it difficult to see the shipping of Rad and Shannon mostly acceptable. But let me be real with you, that is the element that makes this episode better than how the writing from Roadside Attraction from Gravity Falls did wrong. In this episode, KO along with his friends face off Lord Boxman's minions, which leads to a lightning strike hitting Shannon, which causes an error in her system, and she falls in love with Rad after saving his life. This causes Rad to fall in love with Shannon, which leads to the two groups separating from each other to work out this huge difference between Rad and Shannon. In all honesty, with this episode being mostly a Romeo and Juliet storyline, all the while that the moments centering around Rad and Shannon are cringy, to tell you the truth, if this method happened with other characters who aren't like Rad or even Shannon, then to tell you the truth, I can totally understand where people are coming from, that the plot of this episode is cringe-worthy. But the thing is, despite seeing the cringe elements in this episode, sometimes it's not always a bad thing. I mean, it's difficult to sit through, but at the same time, it's not always a bad thing. The romance between Rad and Shannon is similar to the romance of Big Mac and Cheryl Lee from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Hearts and Hooves Day episode. Even though that the Kiyomaki Caseros used a potion of some sort to have the two fall in love with each other, at the same time, it's still similar for how it was executed in the My Little Pony episode, and when it came to the OKKO episode, it's still acknowledged that this whole pairing between Rad and Shannon is bizarre and uncomfortable. As far as I'm concerned, when characters like KO, Enid, Waymont, and Daryl find this whole relationship a huge problem, especially the fact that Shannon is a clone of many Shannon clones, really shows that this episode isn't meant to be taken seriously, since that it's supposed to be an episode that had less meaning in comparison to the other KO episodes. And considering that some KO episodes have value of their own, the only value that I see involving this is that they want to do a homage or a parody of Romeo and Juliet, and mainly Shakespeare's material. Seriously, the music along with the song centering around Rad and Shannon is trying way too hard, and even though that other episodes may have better music, at the same time, when this music tries too hard to take this relationship of Rad and Shannon seriously, even though it's over the top, I liked it in a so bad it's good way, or mainly it's cringe it's good way, because to tell you the truth, when some elements are cringe, it doesn't automatically mean it's bad 100%. Here's what I mean onto why that this shipping between Shannon and Rad actually works in comparison to Candy and Dipper from Gravity Falls, because in Roadside Attraction, it was phoned in, and judging of how that it was poorly executed, with it being one of the final episodes of the series, it's difficult to actually find attachment when it comes to characters that you're familiar with after 3 years since the show started. When it comes to this episode, with it airing multiple episodes, and this episode aired in 2017, which is months after the series started, I can guarantee you that this entire episode isn't meant to be taken seriously or having the same levels in comparison to Roadside Attraction. Even though it can go a little overboard when it comes to the cringe factor, at the same time, the song that Rad and Shannon sang, Star-Crossed Lovers, for me personally, it's an entertaining song. So for what it's worth, if Gravity Falls did a song that centers around Dippo and Candy singing, let me tell you, that's where I actually draw the line. Because as far as I'm concerned, even though that Dippo was poorly executed in the episode, at the same time, if he did sing, that would have been way out of character, and it would have made his character a lot more worse, instead of just him acting goals out. But at the same time, it was mainly Uncle Stan's idea. I still stand by my point that Wendy should have helped out Dippo if she actually was a main character that tagged along during the road trip. To be real with you guys, Rad being in this Romeo and Juliet storyline when it comes to his feelings towards Shannon, it actually works for his character. And yes, I'm fully aware that this whole relationship centering around him and Enid have been established when it comes to their time in high school, and people would probably want me to make a review off of those episodes. At the very least, it really feels like that this episode alone is really capitalizing on how Rad reacts when it comes to his emotions and feelings. Because keep in mind, in the final Red Action episode, he had a feud with Red Action herself. And considering of how that the episode itself just showcases his idiocy for humorous effect, the humorous effect that I've seen is mainly being love-struck. Well, he is unable to have emotions being in check while the love takes the better of him. Believe me when I say this, people do act this way in the real world sometimes, especially when it comes to cartoons where multiple characters are heartbroken when another man or boy is hanging out with a woman/girl and they become boyfriend and girlfriend. Believe me, even though that this has nothing to do with another boy or a man being with Shannon, considering that she's a clone, at the very least, I'm looking at the perspective of Rad himself. Because to tell you the truth, even though that the episode itself is cringe, doesn't automatically mean that Rad is the biggest problem of the episode. And since that Shannon herself is a clone of multiple Shannons, believe me, judging of how that we never get to see this version of Shannon again, since that she exploded for a new Shannon to come out, to tell you the truth, the people who made this episode honestly knew that they weren't gonna go with this anywhere. So no, honestly, this kind of feels like that the ship itself is harmless in comparison to the shipping of Dippo and Candy. Granted, it's harmless still, but at the same time, people were critical due to the fact that it was just phoned in due to a main plot point centering around the characters and the villain itself. While this episode itself didn't got anything in the way, considering that the majority of OKKO episodes have variety. Like, just watch the ending for yourself to understand that this episode isn't meant to be taken seriously. If it were meant to be taken seriously when it comes to having a sequel episode, then I can guarantee you that every single episode should have a sequel episodes of their own, which, for my knowledge, doesn't. And believe me, episodes involving OKKO do have filler into them, and when it comes to the filler that they executed, it's not supposed to be that seriously in comparison to what I've seen in other shows, because compared to the other shows, it really feels like that this show is harmless when it comes to filler, when episodes like this is just mainly for variety. The variety that I've seen from this episode is the Romeo and Juliet storyline, the Shakespeare song when it came to star-crossed lovers, and to tell you the truth, the whole relationship between Rad and Shannon from this episode alone is honestly not the worst thing that I've seen when it comes to shipping, because to tell you the truth, if people can instantly see that the whole gooey stuff from My Little Pony, Big Mac, and Chill Lee is cringeworthy when it comes to the gooey dialogue, then to tell you the truth, the dialogue that I've seen from this episode is nowhere near as bad as the My Little Pony episode. but at the same time, that's just mainly the fact that people just can't be able to handle the cringe, and to be real with you, people criticizing things that are cringe is justified in some cases, but at the same time, it's becoming an overused criticism. Because for people like me who don't find some elements cringe, it really feels like that there's a different direction of the writing and execution that people just do not understand, and even though that they do and they still cringe at it, at the very least, there are much more worse cringier moments from other shows. There's a reason onto why this isn't a Cartoon Crisis 3 video, because I don't need to force myself into be in complete cringe or enrage when it comes to the episode itself. That's just basically how I feel, which you understand onto why that there are less Cartoon Crisis 3 videos as the months went by, with the last being the My Life as a Teenage Robot preschool episode that I did last month. If you're binge watching this show for the first time and you come across this episode, keep this in mind. You only need to sit through it once if you find the episode cringy. Like, you can still give out your opinion of it, but at the same time, if you actually enjoy the episode, it's fine. Like, this episode is still harmless at the end of the day. To tell you the truth, it would have been a lot more problematic if the elements were gone too far with the other characters enjoying this relationship of Rad and Shannon. Because to tell you the truth, if this episode didn't take a book out of the My Little Pony episode where the Kuya Marcus found the prop, found this relationship of Big Mac and Cheryl a problem, then to tell you the truth, then this episode would have been a Cartoon Crisis 3 video entirely. But it didn't. So I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10.